Look at this mess. This shelf in particular, I'm pretty sure has passed between every room in both houses my wife and I have ever lived in, and somehow has ended up in my new home office and became a dumping ground of my new office. Come to think of it, the only thing that needs to be here is that Sonos speaker up there. So how about we go build a speaker stand, go put away these movies and TV shows, and then throw away everything else. Let's get started.
Welcome everyone, my name is Terry and this is my lab. Today we're going to build a speaker stand that will match my standing desk I built at the end of last year. To get started we're going to need to mill some lumber. I was originally going to try and up my woodworking game and use something fancier than standard lumber from Home Depot, but with the current lumber prices, that changed my plan a little bit. I have one 8-foot 2x4 and roughly 5 feet of a 2x6. I cut the 2x4 in half to make it a little bit more manageable and started milling up all the boards to get rid of the rounded edges. To make the base, I need a 10-inch by 10-inch square that is 3 inches high. I cut the 2x6 into sections that are a little bit longer than 10 inches just so I could clean it up later and adjust as needed. The key to this project will be a good glue up for the base and center section. With lumber prices the way they are, don't be afraid to waste glue. Right now glue is very cheap, lumber is not. So don't be afraid to make a mess. Glue is very easy to chip away after it's dry. While the base pieces were in clamps, I started working on the middle section of the speaker stand. I wanted the power cable to be concealed inside the stand. The plug for the speaker is roughly 1¼ inches long, so I cut a 3/4 inch high by 1 inch channel into each 2x4. To do this, you could use a router or a dado stack, but I don't have the right router bit or a dado stack, so 16 passes through the table saw it is. After all the passes through the table saw were complete, I broke off the remaining wood and lightly sanded the inside of the channel. Since this is the inside of the middle section of the stand, I wasn't worried about getting a perfectly smooth finish here. I just wanted to knock off any edges that the power cable could get stuck on. Now that the base is glued up, it's time to start the center section. Sorry, I'm not like other woodworkers on YouTube that have a couple hundred clamps sitting on the wall behind me. I started by running a bead of glue down both sides of one of the pieces of wood and then used every clamp that I own to hold this together while the glue dried. Now to start making the last piece of the speaker stand, the top where the speaker actually sits. I grabbed the last piece of 2x6 I cut earlier and started marking out the dimensions for the top. Then after that, I went to the router table and started cutting off all the excess material and cutting out a notch for the power cable to loop into. The next day, I grabbed the base piece and threw it through the table saw again to make it square and to cut it down to its final size. Then I took some scrap pieces of wood to find the perfect angle for the chamfer on the base. After I found the right angle, I started to remove the extra material from the base until all the extra material was gone. I wanted to add a nice round over to the middle section to match the styling of the Sonos One speaker. Luckily, I do have that router bit, so after a few passes through the router and a couple of quick cuts on the miter saw, the middle section was ready for sanding. I did a quick cable test fit to make sure it would go through the middle section easily. Then it was on to drilling a hole in the base for the power cable to feed into. Now that all the pieces are done, it's time to sand it all. But guess what? Watching sanding is kind of like watching paint dry, so here's a short version instead of trying to make sanding footage interesting. I sanded all 3 pieces with 120 grit, 220 grit, then went back, sprayed water on to raise the grain, and sanded them again with 220 and 320 grit sandpaper. Now we can move on to gluing this thing up and starting to see its final form. I used the cutoff from the middle section to help me gauge where the middle section should sit on the base, and then it was just like all the rest of the glue ups. I cut out a small peg essentially that was 3/4 the size of the channel and used my trusty cutoff to position the peg on the bottom of the top piece. This little peg is to hold the top piece to the middle piece and to hold the power cable in the channel correctly so it's not sticking out oddly. Yep, you caught me. I skipped over staining because similar to staining, it's like watching paint dry. I did 2 coats of stain and 2 coats of polyurethane to protect it. The last step before the big reveal is to attach the feet. The feet just add a little extra height so the power cable can sneak right in between the floor and the stand. I really love how this speaker stand came out. Feel free to use this idea as inspiration for your Sonos or other speaker related projects. All jokes aside about lumber prices, even in 2021, this was still less than $20 in lumber from Home Depot. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and or comment below. If you like woodworking, home improvement projects, or tech, please consider subscribing. Until next time, I'm Terry, and this is TD Sheridan Lab.